GM, my name is Terry, and welcome to the Goblin Hideout, the NFT Finance Podcast. I'm once again joined by my co-host, Helmus, and today we welcome Nickev from Renft.
Hey, Nick, how's it going?
Good. How you guys doing?
Good. So I think to kick it off, let's talk a little bit about yourself and how you got involved in crypto and NFT finance.
Yeah, totally. So I guess to back up a little bit, most of my kind of traditional experiences in the Web 2 game development, indie game world. So kind of back when Xbox indie games were all the craze, we built two of the most successful Xbox indie games, one of which was the first real port of Minecraft to Xbox called Total Miner. And another one called Miner of Duty that was like a early voxel shooter kind of combo. For some reason, voxel design has followed my game development career kind of throughout. So after those, got super in depth in kind of Bitcoin, peer-to-peer money, blockchain tech as a whole in like 2014. Had known about it for the years prior, but didn't really dive in too much. Specifically, we were trying to do kind of an early sports betting concept, which at the time, sports betting was highly illegal and worse than murder in most places, it seemed. And so kind of Bitcoin was the perfect way to do it. Sort of scrapped the idea. It was something I was doing with my brother. And I went deep down the rabbit hole, essentially. The notion of this kind of tech really stuck with me and what else was possible with it. So kind of went deep in a personal standpoint, investment standpoint, all of that. And then in 2017, I learned about NFTs through CryptoKitties, and it was kind of both my worlds colliding. Like gaming assets to me just made sense. And it was really the merge of two of my passions. So dove in full time into the space kind of later that year or so at the Sandbox game. Where it was for about 2.5 years, and built out like a variety of initiatives over there, where ultimately the core re-NFT idea kind of spun out of. We are seeing loads of users acquiring millions of dollars of virtual land pre the NFT hype wave, really with no other intent but to rent them out and become, landlords essentially. And it was shocking to us, the limitations of the 721 1155 standards, and that no one was really talking about it, and that like additional tech needs to be built to enable any kind of true financial activity, right?
Cool. So I think this nice segue into what is re-NFT, and could you provide us the Alice and Bob example?
Yeah, totally. So re-NFT at its core, we're a multi-chain NFT renting and lending protocol. But we're kind of a protocol layer first, platform second. And what I mean by that is we can be white label integrated into any project to enable collateral free renting, lending, and what we call reward share, which is your scholarship automation. So we don't really care to be the front facing platform. We're definitely gaming focused, especially initially where we see most of our use cases, and sort of become that plug and play infrastructure for games to enable some pretty cool things. So basically you have, Alice, who has NFTs, wants to lend them out to somebody to trustfully use in some game experience. Maybe there's some access wherever some sort of utility lies. Bob comes along, rents the NFT, gets the use right to utilize that asset in said project, game, whatever it is, and can use it. Whereas then Alice gets paid the rent in the simplest form.
Cool. And you guys just closed out a $5 million strategic funding round and announced that last week. How's this going to help position yourselves in re-NFT over the coming months? And what are some of the upcoming gaming and financial, NFT related use cases that you think are interesting?
Yeah, for sure. So we specifically did a second funding round because we did kind of a pre-seed seed level $1.5 million funding round led by Animoca way back like October of 2021. And the idea there was to really start scaling our team, get into the broader vision. At the time, like NFTs weren't even really starting to, they're just barely starting to take off. The latest funding round both allows us to really bring in like a lot of strong strategic partners. So, Mechanism and Gumi obviously co-led it. We have like some strong ones in there like Gemini, OpenSea, Sparkle Ventures, a couple guilds like GuildFi, etc. So really just allows it to go broader. I've been through plenty of bear markets myself, and we kind of thought there was a correction on the horizon, and I think we hit our timing perfectly. So for us, it's really just about scaling, especially given we're multi-chain, completely chain agnostic protocol. So we're balancing quite a bit and building, quite a bit of products on different chains. So the dev firepower just to do that and also maintain the solution on each chain is quite intensive.
Got it. I do want to delve a little bit more into the protocol. You explained what Renft is and how it works. My understanding, though, is that you have a plethora of different products: uncollateralized lending, collateralized lending, scholarships automation. Can you go through each and explain how they work? And if I missed anything, let me know.
Yeah, definitely. So our collateralized solution was really more of a kind of proof of concept. So we initially built it out of a hackathon, a Chainlink hackathon, almost 2 years ago now, like a year and 10 months or so ago. The idea was for it to be generalized for any 721 or 1155 asset. So, essentially the lender would put up their NFT. It's escrowed in our core contract. When the renter came along, they put up collateral and they gained custody of that NFT. And that collateral was the backstop for them to return it, right? And so obviously that cuts off 99% of rental cases, right? Because oftentimes what we saw was, of course, over collateralization because that floor prices are so volatile. We saw liquidations where some people would just forget to return it, or they would liquidate somebody because the floor price has pumped beyond the collateral and it was essentially free profit, right? And we knew that was the case, but it was more so for us kind of proving, hey, there's more to NFTs than just a PFP. At the time, right, it was very stuck to NFTs or art. And I think it did well at like opening people's minds. So we don't really like even actively maintain the collateralized solution. It was really just that proof of concept. Then we have our collateral free, which is kind of the future of everything we're doing, where we're integrating everywhere in all of our cases. The collateral free works similarly. Basically, over the last year and a half, we've probably built every type of way to do an existing asset rental, from wrapper-based solutions to like multi-sig style solutions. And we've landed on one main one, which is, we call it our use right solution. Basically how it works, lender comes onto the platform or through an integration on some other platform, puts their NFT up for rent, defines an upfront daily rental price as well as a max rental duration. We also tailor in like additional functionality or parameters to be set depending on the project. Like, sometimes we see a minimum rental duration wanted, or they only want them to do like specific things. That NFT is escrowed in our core contract. The reason being, so there's not a duplicate running around, right? Then on the flip side, when the renter comes along, instead of posting that collateral and getting full custody of the actual asset, what happens is they just simply rent the asset, and all in one transaction, we basically delegate out a use right is the best way to think of it. So there's no actual NFT being minted that's given to the renter or the original NFT or anything. They're basically given like an input completely on chain in our contract that maps back to the original rental agreement, original token, original contract metadata, everything. Essentially like a decentralized database, right? So then on a game side or any kind of project side, it's as easily integratable as wherever they're currently loading in assets from their own contract, they simply need to support ours. So we have like a variety of ways to do that. We have, an SDK, API, subgraph, whatever they want to do. We kind of get as decentralized or centralized as the game or project wants to get.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding of the uncollateralized rental solution is that the renter has to lock it into a vault type smart contract. And then the SDK or whoever is managing the game side, when they ping the SDK, the subgraph, the API, it returns essentially the owner of address, which is the rentee.
Right. So it basically says this NFT's in, the rental contract that they're recognizing, which is the Renft contract. This address is basically like whitelisted, or however you want to phrase it, allowed to use that asset rather than the original owner. So they're basically loading in like an artificial right of sorts.
Got it. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And you did enumerate on a couple of these solutions. You said you looked at different systems of uncollateralized lending, right? Like multi-sig solutions, wrapper solutions, and we've seen kind of like flash loan solutions, things like that. How would you compare and contrast these, and why did you guys end up using the solution that you guys ended up with?
Yeah, so really, like, I think the closest thing is obviously that people get towards is probably the wrapper solution. And the reason why we built it and don't really love it, and we might even offer it to projects at some point as well, just because we have built it, if it does make sense, like it makes sense in a few use cases depending on the chain, but is because like really three reasons. One of being which rentals, the critical thing is everything has to be as cheap as humanly possible, right? Like every transaction, anything you're doing, like the whole reason, especially in a lot of these gaming cases, that people are renting is because they either want to just temporarily use an asset, maybe they can't afford an asset, or other, right? So it has to be as cheap as possible. And we realized like we were minting an NFT and giving it to the renter for no real reason, right? Like all they really need is the right to use the original asset rather than needing a copied version of the original asset. So like right there, the cost was already cut in half by just not minting that. And the other two reasons are, one of which is like potential unwanted composability. And, it's not to say that a protocol would build this, but we live in this crazy world and I'm blown away every day at what happens in the crypto space with different protocols. But imagine a scenario where, the renter has this wrapped NFT that's basically, in a sense, showing their position that they've rented something. Perhaps a loan protocol starts supporting those positions. And now you have something that the lender didn't actually want, right? Which is like, imagine being able to, in the real life scenario, rent out, you're renting an apartment from your landlord, and then you go to the bank and you get a loan against that apartment that you don't actually own, right? So we didn't want to have any potential like weird composability effects there that were unwanted. And then the third is like fragmented collections. It's like we realized, especially as we're trying to gear towards mainstream gamers, you start to have these fragmented, like wrapped version collections, like be it imagine a sandbox land, right? Like now you have wrapped sandbox land, that's rented sandbox land, but then you need to burn the NFTs because it's just really confusing from a user perspective. And really the only intent with that was to show the right of the rental, right? Because you still need the game side integration, even with the wrapped collection, in the same way that we do. And then also like, we can't do any kind of things, which I'll get into in a second, around our rev share solution, which is where we see a lot of games actually want to integrate.
Got it. Just a little bit more on this note before we go into the rev share solution, and I understand the scholarship automation product. Those are the two remaining ones we haven't discussed. The other solutions in regards to uncollateralized lending that we understand exist is, number one, like a new ERC standard. I believe that was tried multiple times. And then the other one was a multi-sig solution, which you said you also looked into. We're not too familiar with the implementation details here, but what did you guys find was, I guess, just not optimal for the like the new ERC standards and the multi-sig solution that led you guys to do the solution that you guys have built?
Yeah, definitely. So there's a few EIPs. So like we've been in the working group for 2615, which had to do with like mortgage and rental functionality. It's effectively been dead for quite some time. It's years old, never really went anywhere. Like one of the things we took a step back from is like, first of all, a standard's very difficult and very expensive to push forward, right? Like the biggest thing we've noticed, gaming is where our initial activity is and our initial real use cases are. And it's also one of the most sensitive areas. And what I mean by that is like games are trying to get out of the crypto bubble and target mainstream users and avoid headaches and problems, right? The games already have plenty of issues to deal with, that the last thing they want to do is now migrate their NFTs to a new standard and ask something of their user base as well, away from like, marketplaces also need to adapt the standard, and they're moving. It's essentially like moving chains, right? Like you're moving away from where the volume is. You're never going to get every single asset actually bridged over there. Now you have two fragmented collections, things get confusing. So it starts to be like maintaining two, right? And we think that's a very difficult problem, and that games have so many other areas they're focused on right now, like even just building in wallet solutions that make sense. So I think standards are great in the 5-year plus vision, but in a sense, like what we're building is a hacky approach to a standard to then get people to a broader standard as well. Like a lot of the standards we've seen, they don't they don't address any of the headaches and like edge cases that we see within play to earn, play and earn, however you want to phrase them, just NFT enabled game economies. We can't build in the reward share functionality, like still additional things need to be built there, etc. On the multi-sig style solutions, I think it just depends. You wind up building a new wallet essentially, and now you're kind of a centralized base wallet. In a sense, because you have to build like a front end that they actually want to integrate and is actually beautiful from a UX perspective. If you have just kind of a multi-sig in the back, it starts to get really expensive as well with a lot of transactions happening. So I think it just depends on the specific one, but we have yet to see a great one. I think things get really exciting if and when account abstraction actually comes to Ethereum and EVM chains as a whole, but it's still so early in that realm.
Got it. And what were the other products that you guys offer? The scholarship automation product and I believe the RevShare product.
Yep. So the RevShare, which we're kind of phrasing now as reward share more so, is essentially, if you're familiar with the traditional guild model, it's scholarship automation, right? So rather than an upfront rental price being paid by a renter to actually utilize an asset, what happens is the lender can put up that asset for reward share. So it could be an ERC20 token, it could be NFTs, it could be both, depends on the game integration we actually integrate with. For instance, we're integrating with a game right now on Avalanche, where it's going to be the first one we're actually rolling out the reward share with. And their in-game ERC20 token is going to be completely automated through this Scholar automation. So lender defines preset splits, essentially. So like you could come on, you could split, they could define 80% to the actual renter, 20% to the lender, and we effectively automate the entire process. Like the traditional guild model is very flawed if people actually really dive in, and it's almost kind of a joke what's happening on the base level. Like you're paying a manager to trustfully split revenues, keeping track on spreadsheets. It's quite a mess. And then any great solutions are super centralized and are essentially just a database. So reward share is really us flipping that model on its head, cutting out that manager, fixing guild's largest issue in scaling. Like they have two issues. One is capital to acquire assets, and the second one is the ability to hire managers they can trust and scale the model, and truly automating it rather than like some SaaS-based product that a lot of projects are building for guilds.
Got it. One thing I'm curious about is we've seen with Axie first and then now StepN that they're willing to create their own solutions for either DEXs or I guess like DeFi protocols. And then we've seen with things like Legends of Inari or Kubata that they're going to create their own rental solutions. In a market like this, like how do you gain stickiness as an NFT finance protocol that is targeting games? How do you prevent games from verticalizing, into the NFT finance stack? What's like the RenFT solution there?
Yeah, definitely. We see a bit of both. So like I would say quite honestly, 9 times out of 10, the games are receptive. They get the value add, they see it. And then there's that 1 out of 10 cases that is what you say. It's like, why don't we build it ourselves? And I think there's a much deeper question there, which is, well, you could build your own payment processor as well. You could build your own DEX. You could build your own marketplace. Like at some point, it's like kind of where's the line, right? But I think the biggest value add for us outside of the obvious ones, which are like time. That's where we see and why we see most games interested is they kind of recognize all the edge cases within rentals. On the surface, I think rentals seem super simple. And then as you dive in and you start to think about all these different things, like, different rights models, what happens when there's an airdrop? What happens when there's, some staking component? Like, how does this all play in? They realize that it's a product in itself and they need, a team focused on that, which that is our core and only focus, right? But as well as just the time saving. Like that's why we see them most interested is they recognize it'll take them a few months, 3 months, 4 months, whatever, to develop their own solution. And it's going to be some like internal database of sorts. And we're ready on most chains before them. But as well as like our ability to custom tailor, right? Like we tailor and we put in the work to build in different functionality, change certain functionality off our baseline protocol on how they want it to function. So there's really no downside to them going with us other than like small fee revenue share, which I can get into in a second. But we'll always see that small percentage that does build their own. But I think the market share is big enough that it doesn't really matter. And now, probably the most interesting value add outside of all of that for us is the composability, right? So if you look at, loan protocols, fractionalization protocols, our kind of internal guess is that over the next year, 6 months, whatever it is, a lot of NFTs are going to be locked in contracts, be it with a loan against it, fractionalized, staked, whatever it is. And given our rights model and that we work with the game or project on the integration side, we have this like unique position to be able to actually assign that use right to those NFTs locked in a contract that maybe it's a basket of gaming assets that has some actual utility. Maybe it's, some sort of ticket that has access, whatever it is, where we can actually rent them out while they have a loan against it. Like imagine a real world scenario where you took a loan against your house, right? And then you couldn't rent your house out to someone. You had to move out of it. Like it makes no sense, right? We have this kind of broken portion of the financial loop for NFTs, XDeFi to really come full circle because, there's no real way to accurately value the NFTs. Like it's very subjective and every single one is different. But as well, like there's no easy way to actually lend them out to have some sort of passive income if there is the potential or want to rent out that asset while they're in some other contract. So then as well, right, we start to give the lender, if we can have that income coming in, a better way to value the loan as well. And that's one of their biggest issues. So for us, it's really about building this like composable circle where like DeFi starts to come alive around these assets instead of being like very fragmented and broken in different areas. So essentially like, loan protocols, like we're talking with a ton, we're integrating with a ton, fractionalization protocols, like they're all kind of looking up to us in a way. And like we're looking up at games, right, to put out their products. It's kind of like going to be a cascading effect, I think, as products really start to come alive.
Got it. It seems quite evident that one of the clear use cases that you guys are targeting and perhaps have observed in V1 and V2 of the protocol are gaming scholarships and gaming-based rentals. Just around that note, who is using rental solutions? Who needs rental solutions? And what have you guys observed in terms of user demographics?
Yeah, definitely gaming's been our focus. Like we've toyed around with a lot of other projects, ticketing ones, anywhere there's kind of like rented access. I think there's a lot to dive into there, but they're even earlier. But gaming is our focus. We're chain agnostic, like there's a lot unannounced. We've only really announced a couple. We're big fans of like actually announcing an integration or what you're actually doing together rather than kind of marketing hype announcements that the space is very used to. But we're working with a ton on all chains. Like we put out our Galaxy Fight Club one, which is one of the first live integrations we actually put out. That one started on mainnet with their heroes. We're going to be also rolling out Polygon for their weapons, as well as then the reward share when they put out their actual token. So that similar model is how we're approaching a lot of other games. Most of these games, though, the biggest thing, as I'm sure you guys are well aware, is they're still building their own products, right? Like a lot of them we approach and they're like, hey, we're ready. We need it in 2 weeks. And we're like, let's roll. And then we ask them how their wallets flow or what solutions they're using for certain things. And they're kind of like, well, we're not sure yet. We're still doing that, or we're still building this. So in a way, we're kind of backlogged by them. But until then, we're kind of just fine tuning the product, expanding all chains, adding new product offerings, and then working on more ready integrations in the back burner as well.
That's great, Nick. And then just wanted to circle back. You alluded to, I believe it was like the protocol fee. And correct me if I'm wrong, but ReNFT currently right now is free. How is the DAO or again, I wasn't 100% clear if you're operating in a DAO format right now, but maybe you can speak a little bit about the future of ReNFT as a DAO, and then how the protocol fee ties into that.
Yeah. I think a lot of projects, are quote unquote DAOs, which is we're one of those right now, right? Like we're very much a centralized team. It's too early to truly decentralize out. So we are, I always say, like a future DAO, right? As these kind of integrations start to come alive and continue rolling out. what I was alluding to on the fee, so you're absolutely right. It is set to 0 for initial adoption, but I think this is where the DAO gets most interesting. So, we haven't put out a token. We're big proponents of not putting out a token until there's that real activity. We want those 2, 3, 4, 5 live integrations with true activity happening, before just putting out some inflated token that, rides to 0 because there's nothing to do with it. And so why I say that gets exciting is because, when we integrate with each game, take a sandbox case, for example. I just keep using that one because it's close to home. We actually integrate their payment token, right? So like we integrate Sand in that case as that ERC20. Most of the games we're talking with already want to enable a fee to start building up their treasury, of course, to have a sync in their game as well, to some degree or another, depending on the ecosystem. But in the sandbox case, right, we enable Sand as the payment token. So technically, when we do enable that fee, it comes from the lender's rental income side. And we're technically collecting that in that game's token, right? So like we would be earning in Sand. So where it gets interesting is our rent token sort of becomes this like super calculated index outside of a variety of other things. But just to focus on that for a second, your kind of guild model, they're sort of mini VCs at this point in kind of shotgun approach to assets, right? They acquire a ton of assets across a ton of games. Some die, some will succeed, and they're betting on those big winners. Whereas our DAO is technically earning tokens in each of these different integrations based off of like true player activity and actually play happening, right? And so, sure, we might sell some off for overhead, but in a perfect world, we actually want to stake back into their ecosystem or get intertwined in some way, however that looks based on their economy. Like, to some degree, their success is our success, especially the larger ones. And if they're providing 80% of our protocol activity, like we don't necessarily want to just be dumping their token, right? I think that's another way that projects get excited about actually outsourcing all this work to us, and having us get involved is like we sort of prove that, right? As well, we do rev share back with the game in that scenario as well. So like, you say it's a 2.5% fee or whatever, we rev share portion of that back, and we kind of operate under a traditional payment provider model. So let's say they are providing 80% of our activity and we started on a 50-50 split. Well, there's no reason, just like a traditional payment provider, they shouldn't be able to put up a DAO proposal and, prove that data and say, we want to negotiate to 70-30, right? So these kind of things are where the DAO, I think, starts to kind of come to life and come alive. And that's just like one specific example, but I think it's an interesting one.
Nick, you've alluded to some partnerships in that response over there. But what are some other partnerships that you guys might tease?
Yeah, I there's a lot, man. There's a lot happening. A big game one we're doing, I'll say, is on Avalanche, and it's a big game studio. So maybe people can find that one. It's going to be announced really soon, though. We're going to be rolling out, like I mentioned, our reward share product there. So that's all I'll say there. But definitely get involved. There's a lot of, we're seeing a lot of Web2 studios start to flow in, which I'm personally excited about because they know, at least some know how to build fun and engaging Web3 games or Web2 games rather, and then they're kind of putting on the Web3 spin. So I'm excited to see some of those come to life.
Yeah, that's great, Nick. I guess, how would someone get involved in Re-NFT? What type of people are you looking for? Is it best to just show up at the Discord? Should they follow you on Twitter? What's the best way to do that?
Yeah, definitely join the Discord. Check out the Twitter, follow us. Twitter's at ReNFT Labs. You'll find the Discord through there as well. ReNFT.io is our website. There's some pretty extensive new docs and new branding website we kind of just put out. But we've got this Mission Astro program going on in our community. It's a great way to get involved. There's ways to earn, be it writing content, even just graphics, like just all kinds of fun and engaging ways to actually get involved with the community. So dive in. I encourage everyone to just get in there, ask questions. We're around.
Awesome. We really appreciate having you on, Nick. And we'll be looking forward to keeping our eye on Re-NFT in the future.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me, guys. Big fan of the podcast, and keep up the epic stuff.
follow me on Twitter. I'm 0xTayTayHoHo on Twitter. That's Tay with an E. And you can follow Ryan at _Helmass.
Yeah, and that's _HELMASS. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and we'll catch you soon.